Perhaps Solomon's most famous act was the construction of the temple with materials and plans provided by his father David. God had promised David that he would allow his son to build the first permanent place of centralized worship, as predicted centuries before in the book of Deuteronomy. It was a magnificent temple and took 7 years to build. It took 12 years to build Solomon's palace, however. Although the temple was constructed out of cut stone, the sound of hammer and chisel was never heard. Thus, the temple was erected silently. 1 Kings 6:7. While it was being built, the house was built of stone, prepared and finished, pre-cut at the quarry, and no hammer, axe, or iron tool of any kind was heard in the house while it was under construction. For many years, this remained a mystery, until someone discovered a massive cave the size of a large theatre on Mount Moriah near Calvary outside Jerusalem. Millions of small chips cover the floor where the rock has been cut. The rock is so soft that it can be cut with a penknife, but when exposed to air, it oxidizes and becomes quite hard. All of the stones for the temple came from this cave, where they cut the blocks to fit into the temple above ground. His reign brought great prosperity to the Israelites. The empire stretched from Egypt to the Euphrates and included most of the territory promised to them. The Queen of Sheba visited Solomon and was impressed by the splendor. The Book of Kings, chapter 6, contains a detailed description of the layout of the temple. They can be pretty intricate and technical at times, making it difficult to gain a clear picture of the situation. Nevertheless, we are aware that the construction of the temple followed something like the following. It measured a length of 90 feet, a width of 30 feet, and a height of 45 feet. It had been split up into 2 separate rooms. The first room was the sanctuary, and its dimensions were as follows: 60 feet in length, 30 feet in width, and 45 feet in height. Light was provided by the latticed windows, which were most likely located at the top of the structure. The second room was the inner sanctuary, and it had dimensions of 30 feet in length, 30 feet in width, and 30 feet in height. The vestibule added 30 more feet to the length at the east or front end, and was elevated 15 feet above ground level. Side chambers or rooms for the priests were located on the north, west, and south sides of the temple. Each of these sections had 3 levels. Although they were up against the temple's wall, these were not considered to be part of the structure itself. All the lumber and stone for the temple was finished at the quarry to exact specifications, so that when brought to Jerusalem, the pieces could be fitted together without iron tools. Nothing but gold was visible inside the temple. The folding or sliding doors leading to the inner sanctuary are described in verses 31 and 32. The rooms were also separated by a veil that hung inside the doors of the inner sanctuary. 2 Chronicles 3:14. He made the veil between the holy place and the Holy of Holies of blue, purple, and crimson colors, and fine linen and embroidered cherubim on it. The main doors leading to the sanctuary are described in verses 33 to 35. 1 Kings 6:33 to 35. Also he made for the entrance of the outer sanctuary, the holy place, 4-sided doorposts, frames of olive wood, and 2 doors of cypress wood. The 2 leaves of the one door turned on pivots and were folding, and the 2 leaves of the other door also turned on pivots. He carved cherubim, palm-shaped decorations, and open flowers on the doors, and overlaid them with gold evenly applied on the carved work. In front of the temple was the inner court of the priests. There was a low wall between it and the outer court. This wall consisted of 3 rows of hewn stone and a row of cedar beams. In the inner court were a huge brazen altar for sacrifices. The outer court was for the people of Israel. The temple was begun in the 4th year of Solomon's reign and was finished 7 years later. Next, 2 huge pillars of bronze, which stood at the entrance of the temple, are described. One was named Jachin, he shall establish, and the other Boaz, in him is strength. We are just provided with information regarding the material aspects of these pillars. We are not informed regarding the spiritual meaning of them. Someone has well observed that the pillars of God's living temple today are believers of holy character. Galatians 2:9. And recognizing the grace that God had bestowed on me, James and Cephas, Peter and John, who were reputed to be pillars of the Jerusalem church, gave to me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, so that we would go to the Gentiles with their blessing, and they to the circumcised Jews. Revelation 3:12 is God's promise that those who overcome will be made pillars in his heavenly temple for all eternity. Revelation 3:12. He who overcomes the world through believing that Jesus is the Son of God, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. He will most certainly never be put out of it, and I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which descends out of heaven from my God, and my own new name. The images are sometimes grander than we can imagine. The enormous bronze lava that stood in the inner court was known as the Sea of Cast Bronze. It was a big basin that was positioned in the south of the temple and altar, and it was supported by 12 bronze oxen. It supplied water for the priests to wash their hands and feet. In addition to the large lava, there were 10 smaller lavas resting on 4-wheeled carts or stands. No mention is made of the bronze altar until 864, although it too was in the inner court. Huram supervised the construction of all the burnished bronze work in connection with the temple area, including the pots, the shovels, and the bowls of the temple itself. He was from Tyre, as was his father, and his mother was from the tribe of Naphtali. King Solomon sent to Tyre and brought Huram, whose mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali and whose father was from Tyre and a skilled craftsman in bronze. Huram was filled with wisdom, with understanding, and with knowledge to do all kinds of bronze work. He came to King Solomon and did all the work assigned to him. 1 Kings 7:13-14. The bronze articles were cast in clay in much the same manner as is done today. The furnishings of the holy place included the golden altar of incense, the table of gold, 10 golden tables of showbread, 10 golden lampstands of pure gold, and golden utensils. David had made elaborate preparations for the temple that he was not allowed to build. Solomon brought these treasures into the temple for use and safekeeping. Solomon was also in charge of the temple's dedication. His dedicatory prayer, which is based on Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, is detailed in Kings. It mentions God's promise to return his people from exile if they return to him, a promise that became especially important for those in Babylon when the book was published. The prayer of dedication is recorded in verses 22-53. After extolling God for keeping his covenant with David concerning the temple, he asked him to fulfill another covenant that he had made with David, the promise that there would never fail to be a descendant of David to sit on the throne. Solomon was aware that there was no building on earth that could house the great God, but he still prayed that the Lord would recognize this temple and that whenever he or anyone from Israel addressed God there, he would hear and forgive them. After spending time in prayer to God, Solomon bestowed blessings upon the temple, by making an impassioned appeal for the presence of God, as well as for the ability to remain faithful to Him and to serve as a witness for Him among the other nations of the world.